Welcome to Should I Read It? Should I Read It is a weekly podcast that takes a deep dive into books. I'll provide a summary of the book and tell you how the ideas in the book relate across all the books we've covered so far. Welcome to episode 14 of Should I Read It? Today we're going to work through H3 Leadership. This is the author's, Brad Lomenick's, look at the 20 habits that he feels make a good leader. Have you ever been just done with work? So done that you need a long time off. That was the catalyst for Brad Lomenick to write H3 Leadership. Brad was just burned out on running an organization called Catalyst and needed a sabbatical. Out of that sabbatical, he dug deep into his life and what success was. And thus we have the three main areas that he feels encompass good leadership habits. His first area is humble, which is all about answering who you are. Second is hungry, which answers the questions about where you want to go. Third, we have hustle. This is all about how you're going to get to where you want to go. Inside each of these areas is a set of habits that Lomenick feels you need if you want to be a strong leader. And that's the purpose of the book. Teach us the 20 key habits that Lomenick feels make us good leaders. Lomenick focuses on habits because all humans are creatures of habit. And he actually says, when you rise in the morning, nearly half of your day will be determined by the patterns you've either intentionally created or passively allowed. Knowing this, we must also understand that it's vital to craft what we do with intention. We must not just let things go by us in a haphazard fashion. Before we dive into the habits that H3 Leadership is all about, let's look at the definition of habit according to Lomenick. Here's a quote from the book. A habit is a practice shaped by behavior or daily action that helps turn ideals into action, principles into practice, and concepts into concrete. I actually think he misses the proper definition of habit here, because he talks about ideals into action. A habit has nothing to do with ideals, necessarily. Oh, it probably should have something to do with positive actions, but so many of our habits have nothing to do with anything positive. They're simply the ingrained patterns that have happened in our lives. We also see the importance of habits in The One Thing. Here's a quote from that book. Put up with the discipline long enough to turn it into a habit, and the journey feels different. Lock in one habit so it becomes part of your life, and you can effectively ride the routine with less wear and tear on yourself. The hard stuff becomes habit, and the habit makes the hard stuff easy. Building habits means that you don't have to rely on willpower all the time. Willpower is a muscle that gets tired, and when it's tired, we fall back to the easiest decision. Making the easiest thing a habit is what you want. Now, let's dive into Lomenick's first grouping of habits. As I said already, Lomenick feels that the humble habits are all about the character of who you are. When people think about you, what type of person do they think about? The following habits are ones that the author feels will make you a good person. First is a habit of self-discovery. Let's have a quote. The time to develop a habit of self-discovery is not after one has spent a decade in leadership, but before. If one doesn't know who he is, how can he fully know how to live out what he feels called to? This habit is all about leading from the inside, learning your strengths and weaknesses, and working to improve on how you act. It's about maintaining authenticity. It's also about making sure that you don't hang your entire worth on the organization. If the organization fails, that does not mean you are a failure. Develop this habit. Lomenick says, developing a habit of self-discovery means creating intentional rhythms whereby one observes who he is, listens to his life, and strives to define himself apart from his professional assignments. I think that self-discovery and this next habit of openness really tie together tightly. They're almost the same. To start a habit of openness, Lomenick tells us that people would rather follow a leader who is always real versus a leader who is always right. Don't try to be a perfect leader. Just work on being an authentic one. When Lomenick talks about the habit of self-discovery, he talks about authenticity, which is really what the habit of openness is all about. Being open is about admitting when you've done something wrong and apologizing for it. It means being okay with your team calling you on things that you're missing. I actually do this in my family with my kids, getting to call me on using my phone too much. My oldest child will ask me what I'm doing on my phone, and most often I tell her nothing important and hand her the phone so she can go put it in our charging drawer. That does mean sometimes I have to ignore that 7-year-old tone that creeps in when she asks about my phone, but it also empowers her to ask for changes in behaviors that she sees in her parents that she doesn't like. One caution that Lomenick gives us here is that being open is not about vomiting your struggles on your team. Your team is not your therapist. Next up is a habit of meekness. Here's a quote from the book. leaders talk a lot about delegating and raising up proteges and working yourself out of a job and creating a culture where nothing would change if you suddenly resigned. But if you hook those same leaders to a polygraph machine while they talk about these things, the needle will be jumping. Everyone wants to be needed. We want to know that if we vanish tomorrow, our absence would be felt and our presence would be missed. Lomenick addresses this idea again later in The Habit of Succession. As leaders, we should be empowering our teams to be the best team that they can be, the best them that they can be. Unfortunately, for many, meekness is associated with weakness. Here's a quote from Lomenick. Meekness is not about weakness. It's about power under control. It's ambition grounded with humility and lived out confidence, not arrogance. Quiet and appropriate confidence is way more attractive than loud and outspoken arrogance. Now, I've actually seen this power under control in the outdoor sports I've participated in. The people that were truly awesome at whitewater kayaking or climbing usually had little bluster. They just went out and did their thing and knew how good they were. Those that were looking for an ego boost were the ones that kept talking about how amazing they were and the coolest thing they just did. Proper stars don't need to talk themselves up. Now is a habit of conviction. Here's a quote from Lomenick. The best leaders are people of integrity and principle who know the difference between principles and preferences. They are willing to stand up for the right things and stand against the wrong things. These leaders value their reputations, their consciences, and their values. I've always balked at friends that say stuff like, I'll never work at Starbucks. It feels like some high-minded ideal. But I know that I'm going to do any job that keeps my kids in clothes and that I don't find morally objectionable. Ask yourself, what will you never do in your business? What type of projects won't you take on? What lines won't you cross? Be someone of integrity. Now we have a habit of faith. And a quote from the book says, what leader doesn't benefit from developing more self-control or patience? Is there a CEO or manager or parent alive who couldn't use an extra helping of kindness or love? I think not. A healthy spiritual life doesn't happen through osmosis. You can't show up to church on Sunday or attend whatever meeting is for you and become a better spiritual person. Here's a quote from Lomenick. A habit of faith isn't a couple of extra items on your to-do list. It is creating space for God to show up. But an important part is expecting that God will. Lomenick is actually going to come back to address space again later in The Habit of Margin. But you can note the word space for now. Do you have space in your life to rest and recharge and engage in your spiritual practice? Reminding us that it's never ending. Here's another quote from Lomenick. Keep in mind that a habit of faith is never ending. You will never wake up and say, I've officially conquered that whole follow God thing. Instead, you'll need to keep stretching, growing, and progressing until your time on earth is complete. One of my favorite times to listen is up on a local mountain. I head out at 5 a.m. and be far out of contact with the masses that hike it by 6 a.m. Around 6:45, I'm sitting on a peak, enjoying the quiet, looking down at the river snaking through the valley, enjoying some peace and quiet, and feeling my soul get fed. Now we have a habit of assignment. Let's start with a quote from the book. Many people conflate calling with identity. They confuse who they are with what they are made to do. While the two are connected, they are not the same. Identity is who you are, but calling is how you express that. Calling is your purpose. Much of this, I think, was covered in Lomenick's Habit of Self-Discovery. You are not your job. It is not your identity. A huge change in job shouldn't be a soul-crushing endeavor if your priorities are straight. Here's a quote from H3 Leadership. Tailspin. That's what many people go into when they get laid off or their company files for bankruptcy. Why? Because many people think their job is their calling. But deep down, we know this isn't true. Otherwise, one would be unable to live his or her calling before entering the workforce or after retirement. It would only be relevant while one is employed. But a job is simply an assignment. You see this same idea in Great at Work by Morton Hansen, when he says, we need to connect our passion with our purpose. That connection would lead us to the idea of assignment that we see in H3 Leadership. Here's a quote from Great at Work. Some people pursue passion in navigating their careers, but they also manage to connect this passion with a clear sense of purpose on the job. They contribute, serve others, make a difference. They have matched their passion with purpose. Again, that was from Great at Work. Living your current assignment should not be a battle. It should not be a slog. You should love it. In Great at Work, Morton Hansen talks us through many different jobs that may seem like they have little purpose in them. He shows us many times that people can have a purpose. They just have to frame their job properly. If you don't connect your job to your purpose, that's mostly on you. Lomenick ends this habit with a bunch of good questions you can ask yourself if you want to figure out what your passion is and then relate it to the assignment that you currently have. And that brings us to the next grouping of habits, which are hungry, Where are you going? What is it you want from life? I assume that if you're listening to this, you're not just planning to cruise along with the status quo. I'm going to assume that you are hungry for some type of different life. The habits Lomenick walks us through now are about being hungry for something, not just sitting around being passive. And that starts off with the habit of ambition. Here's a quote from Lomenick. One of my rules for leadership is, beware your greatest strength. Why? Because often an influencer's unguarded greatest strength is also his or her greatest weakness, and therefore turns into his or her greatest temptation. Your best can bring you down. One of my great strengths is the ability to focus for hours on end. The resulting weakness is that I just don't do collaboration well. I want to sit down and work away on what I want to work on without meetings or interruptions. Ambition is a great strength to have, but it has to be tempered. Drug dealers have ambition, and they can use it for good or for ill. You must choose to channel your ambition into good things if you want to do good things. This is also where Lomenick's earlier habit of openness is key. If you're worried about your ambition running over the people around you, make sure that you have given them the tools needed to call you out on your out-of-control ambition. Ambitious people can also forget to celebrate wins because they just want to move on to the next goal. This is going to kill your team though. Remember to throw a big party when that goal is achieved. Don't just move on. You see this echoed in Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt when he says, when we achieve our goals or reach milestones along the way, we need to take the appropriate time to celebrate. Celebrating a win validates the work and the goal. Next up is a habit of curiosity. For me, this is where we start getting into some repeat. Not that curiosity is a repeat topic, but the ideas in this chapter start to get repeated in many of the other habits in the book. Lomenick says with the habit of curiosity that if you're not learning, you're not leading to your full potential. One of my favorite podcasts, Read to Lead, regularly says that leaders read and readers lead. Curious people read. Are you curious? One of the often frustrating things about having 3 children under 8 is the continual why questions that come along. Every little thing we do seemingly has 700 of them attached to it. Here's a quote from Lomenick. Questions are critical to curiosity. Asking a great question keeps you informed, in touch, and aware. But how many of us invest time in developing good questions? It's interesting to think how little adults ask why. Is it because the question was drummed out of us? So be curious. Ask more questions. Talk less. Listen more. Everyone has something to teach if we're willing to dig in. Now, a habit of passion. Here's a quote from H3 Leadership. Your team feeds off your energy, for better or worse. Your passion gives permission to those around you to express theirs. You may have to push, pull, kick, or gently nudge people, but part of your responsibility as a leader is to show up every day with a level of energy, passion, and enthusiasm that elevates your attitude toward constant positivity. You don't have a choice. Leaders are organizational health risks or assets. You've got to love it and live it if you're going to lead it. Maybe this is why we see so many leaders being almost over the top passionate about what they're doing. I think of Gary Vaynerchuk and his loud personality, but passion isn't about being loud. It's about loving something and wanting to dive deep into it and showing the team your passion. One caveat for leaders is that no one will be as deeply involved in the business as you are. Your team won't give every second to die on the hill of your business. I worked a job once where the boss expected that type of passion for his company. It resulted in more overtime work in 3 months than I have ever worked in any other year of my business, ever. It also resulted in me leaving the company after just those 3 months. You have to bring your people along with your passion and set your expectations for their sacrifice appropriately. Now we have a habit of innovation, which feels like a fairly large repeat of curiosity to me. It's mostly just curiosity in a team or business context. As a leader, make sure you don't get stuck with what is currently working or has always been done. Be intentional about trying new ideas in your team and business. Here's a quote from Lomenick. Opportunities for innovation are all around us. There are always new and better ways to do what one is currently doing, but you have to be willing to do the work necessary to discover it. If you don't want to be average, you have to try things that no one else is willing to do. You can't just play it safe. You have to take a risk and see if the gamble plays out. In Real Artists Don't Starve, Jeff Goins says, if we want to become artists, we are going to have to break some rules. We cannot do just what is expected of us. At some point, we must break away from the status quo and forge a new path. As it turns out, this is how creativity works best. If you want to be that standout business success, the one that others look up to, then you're going to have to take risks and prioritize innovation. You need to set up an environment that rewards taking risk. That also means you need to deal with the failures that will come along with the risk as well. Now we have a habit of inspiration. Let's jump right in with a quote from the book. Many leaders don't inspire their people because they don't have anything inspirational to say. Influencers who want to develop a habit of inspiration must craft a captivating vision for the future and a persuasive plan for how to get there. People won't willingly follow until they can see how they share in the future of your vision. Is your vision something that others want to buy into? Does your passion have a purpose? And does it connect with the purpose of the people on your team? Is there hope in your mission for them? These are important questions to ask as you bring people into your organization. They need to be inspired by you, not just expected to show up for a paycheck. Now we have a habit of bravery. And being brave is not the absence of fear. It's continuing in the face of things that scare you. There can be no courage or bravery without fear. Being brave is all about taking risks in your professional life. You may be willing to take them personally, but sometimes you need to bet the company as well. Here's a quote from H3 Leadership. Life is really a series of risks. Should you marry this person or wait on another? Either is risky. Should you take the job at the flashy new startup company or keep climbing the ladder where you are? Both involve taking a risk. You know life is risky if you've ever moved away to attend college, or made a financial investment, or purchased a house, or dropped your child off at kindergarten. Best leaders learn to think clearly and quickly and determine which risks are worth taking. But despite the propensity to take regular, calculated risks throughout their lives, many leaders find it difficult, almost impossible, to take them in their professional lives. I see this when I coach people all the time. They're hesitant to take any risk with their business. They fear even a single step backwards, even if that single step is going to yield 25 forward steps. One of the ideas in Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt was that you need to start taking steps, to start taking some risks. Even if you don't see the end yet, take a few steps, and then take a few more. Each time you take another step or risk, you'll see a few steps ahead, and you can keep going. But you gotta start somewhere. Now, that brings us on to the group of hustle habits. I actually don't love the word hustle. As I've usually read it, it seems to mean work all the hours, everything else can wait. I'm a big fan of working hard, but I think that having a successful business with a trail of rocky relationships is still a failure. And I think that Lomenick would agree with me. He's not quite talking about working weekends all the time, but he is talking about putting in the hard work that it will take to excel. Hustling starts with excellence. Just getting lots of tasks done is a waste if they're not tasks that are worthwhile. If you are not executing to a high level that others look up to, then it's time to cut back on what you're doing so that you can do a few things well. Here's a quote from Lomenick. Establishing a standard of excellence begins with a core commitment to a set of standards that scares the daylights out of you. Some people think excellence means being as good as the next guy. I've just started watching Breaking Bad, and I'm not going to encourage criminal behavior. It is interesting to watch Walter White do so many things with excellence, from cooking drugs to disposing of bodies. If he's in, then he's going to do the job right. One of the things that Lomenick cites as a key is remembering the names of people you meet. I actually used to give myself an out on this, but I've worked hard to remember every name and use it when I meet people a second time. Here's a quote from H3 Leadership. When you're dealing with clients or meeting with colleagues, always remember and address them by their names. In a moment when people are often viewed as job titles and potential sales, this will make a massive difference in your work. I've actually seen the other side of this with a sales rep at the canoe store my wife and I used to work at. They called my wife size 8 because she fit all the sample sizes. My wife was the main buyer for this store. She continued to order less and less and express her annoyance to the sales rep that he didn't use her name. The store went from the biggest account to almost nothing in the course of 3 years because my wife kept looking for alternative products from companies that showed her the respect she deserved with her multi-million-dollar orders. After excellence, we have a habit of stick-with-itness. Here's a quote from H3 Leadership. When I consider my life, all the moments that might be loosely labeled success were prepared for. They were fought for. They were the product of many days and months, sometimes years of planning and organization and preparation. These were not creations of happenstance, but products of having persevered over the long haul. There is no overnight success. We keep working hard, and then somehow, as we keep going, we get luckier. As we build a body of work that is excellent, people start to notice us. The overnight success that gets bandied about is a total myth. If you want to get success, stick with something long enough that people start to notice. Ryan Holiday echoes this idea in Perennial Seller when he says, "The more you do, the harder you work, the luckier you seem to get." To accomplish this, Lomenick gives us a bunch of tips like building a routine or cutting out distractions. These things will help us do good work over the long haul, as we have the brain capacity to keep going when things are looking bleak. Extending from the idea of sticking with it is that we need to build the habit of execution. Really, this felt a lot like the previous habit, but it did add a stronger call to a good work ethic and gave readers the freedom to kill projects that aren't working. Specifically with this quote, "Don't complete a project for completion's sake. I often realize that an idea should be killed while you're still attempting to execute. When this becomes clear, murder it and move on. However, if you find dead bodies lying all over the floor, you should evaluate your creative process to determine why so many of the ideas your team is generating are unsustainable." Really, the same could be said for all the reading you do. Only read what you find interesting. If you're done with a book and you're actually 20% through, put it down and move on. Don't feel guilty. Feel energized that you have the space to read the next good book. Now Lomenick starts to address the habit of building a team. And he starts with this quote, "Leadership is a choice, not a position. Be the leader you wish you had. A title or position doesn't automatically make you a leader. Influence makes you a leader. Forced followership doesn't count. People follow the person, not the position." What is the thing your team members want more than anything else? What is their secret dream? What is the most frustrating thing about their work? You should have answers to all of it. If that seems hard and you're not sure where to start, then you should probably read The Coaching Habit for a good framework for regular meetings with your team so you can dig deeper with them. If you find that your team is unhappy working for you, it's your own fault. The culture is up to you, so fix it if you don't like it. Don't make excuses. Take care of your team like you would want to be taken care of. And this takes us to a habit of partnership. Here's a quote from H3 Leadership. "The relationships you form with other leaders and the partnerships your organization forms with other organizations will end up producing the most significant results throughout your life." Now, in this section, Lomenick does a great job of convincing readers that a partnership is important. He doesn't do a great job telling us how to build partnerships. He doesn't do a great job of helping us figure out how to bring value to the leaders we want to be in some sort of partnership with. The first key is probably to start doing work that is worth noticing. Asking for someone's time when you're producing nothing is a surefire way to get a big fat no. Showing them how you can bring value to something they are already doing means that you're much more likely to get a yes when you make a request of that influencer that you want to work with. Now we have a habit of margin. Like I said in the beginning of the section of hustle, I dislike that word. Far too often it's a way to say that we should just work more. Lomenick addresses that in this habit as it's all about creating space in your life. Here's a quote from his book. "Margin is a powerful habit. It creates opportunities. For businesses, margin creates profit. Margin in family creates memories, and in personal finances creates generosity. Margin in our friendships creates significance, and in our lives overall creates options. Options to pursue dreams. Think, pray, process, grow, and ultimately live and lead more fully. For all of us, time is our greatest asset. We can't create more of it. We have to make sure we are using it wisely, and margin allows us to leverage time effectively." Alex Pang echoes this as he speaks about sabbaticals in his book Rest, in that he says, "Over the course of decades across professions in one industry after another, Sonnentang's findings have been consistent. Workers who have the chance to get away mentally, switch off, and devote their energies elsewhere are more productive, have better attitudes, get along better with their colleagues, and are better able to deal with challenges at work. They're also better able to focus intensely on work tasks." That means cut the distractions. Focus on getting more high-value work done, and rest so that you're ready to go when it's time to work. Now, we have our habit of generosity. We'll start with a quote from Lomenick here. "In a capitalist culture, the word generosity has a fiscal connotation, and that's fitting. But generosity is more than how one stewards and spends money. It's a holistic posture that should animate everything a leader does. The more you have, the harder it is to pass it on. If you're already recognized in your space, then generosity can be helping someone that's starting out to get going. I know many people that are only well known now because they were given some love by others that were further ahead. That begs the question, who are you helping to get to the level you're at now? This also comes back to Lomenick's earlier call to collaborate more. When someone reaches out to you about collaborating, take a serious look at it. See how you can be generous with your time and your platform and help them out. Let's end this one with a quote from H3 Leadership as well. "Use your platform to help others and put others on it. Loan your power and influence liberally. The more influence and power you have, the more responsibility you have to use it for the betterment of others." The final habit that is addressed in H3 Leadership is the habit of succession. You will not always be the leader where you're at now. At some point, you will move on, and the organization should survive beyond you. Here's a quote from the book. Too many leaders grab their jobs with an unrelenting death grip. But part of every influencer's responsibility is to boldly build something magnificent and then humbly hand it off to others. The best leaders recognize this early on, creating a pipeline of leadership that transfers responsibilities and power to the next wave, the next line, the next team, so that others can take what you've accomplished and build on it in their own way. Our church is working on building a leadership pipeline that will take experienced leaders and have them mentor others. These future leaders will be enabled to take more control over the different parts of the church. The current leader should be building the next set of leaders and then turning more things over to them. The big key here is that you need to start grooming your successor long before you're ready to move on. In fact, start in the first quarter you assume your job. Start looking for the skills you want to succeed you and make sure that the people on your team are building them. Remember, you're never going to find a carbon copy of yourself. It will take a few people to replace you. You will need to change the job just a bit to fit the strengths of the leader coming after you. Then be ready to hand the reins over and step back. Don't stick around confusing people. Move on to something else. If you've done your job right, the team will grow. This episode of Should I Read It was brought to you by my 8-week business boot camp. You'll find a link to that in the show notes. If you're tired of working all the hours and not getting the traction you want, boot camp will help you get on better footing so you can earn well and still get to see your family. As with every episode, the last question is, should I read H3 Leadership? I love Brad Lomenick's focus on habits because if you can make something second nature, it's with you for life. I did think that some of the habits were repeats though. To offset that knock against the book, each chapter is short so the repeat doesn't take up too much time. I'll place another caveat on this book for some as well. Lomenick is a Christian. He talks about pastors and church and prayer. If that's not up your alley, then maybe you should skip the book. Outside of those two caveats, H3 Leadership is a good and a fairly quick read. It doesn't go too deep into each habit, and there are whole books that might cover a single habit. If you're looking for a fast-ish overview of the habits that make a good leader, then H3 Leadership is a decent starting place. If you're looking to go deep, then H3 Leadership may leave you feeling like you're missing out on something. Thanks for listening to Should I Read It? To support the show, you can leave me a review in iTunes or a heart or a star in whatever podcast player you use. These help more people find the show. If you want to get more reading done, you should get an Audible membership. If you use curtismchale.ca/recommends/audible, that will help the production of the show financially. In our next episode, we're going to look at Paid to Think by David Goldsmith. Paid to Think is a heavily systems-based book. If you love checklists, then you're going to love it because there's a lot of them.